let's talk about this subsystem. Okay, so now if you go here, right, I already have this repository into my GitHub, user service 1. Okay, so it has Docker file, it has build Gradle, then it has basic src file. I'll go to that point as well. I'll describe everything, and then we have your code pipeline, and which has the code build in it. All right, so let's discuss. So now, before deep dive into the code part, let's discuss the code pipeline, or actually let's discuss the code first and then deep dive into the code pipeline and the code build. So that's the way you will be easily able to visualize everything. All right, so I'll open code. Okay guys, actually before that I left one thing, this RDS Postgres. So this RDS Postgres is the relational database system in your AWS, which is same as the, if you remember in my earlier videos I have mentioned the Azure Postgres flexible server, right, which is the managed service of Postgres in Azure. Same thing, you have RDS in your RDS in your AWS. So let's go over RDS as well quickly. So you will see RDS. So databases, yeah, maybe because it's in the different region, east region. So yeah, go to DB instance and see this retail solution. This is already running here. Okay, now you see this RDS I have provisioned, right? And then how can I access this? This is the endpoint, and this is everything is same. Whatever you have in Postgres, you can customize every single thing, and then for all the configurations. When I say customize everything, and then you can access it from your local. So for example, the way I am accessing it is using dbeaver, right? See, this is the connection I have made. If you see my connection, yeah, this is my connection, right? It's Postgres database, this, and port number, this is running, this is my username and password. Okay, now I will cancel this, I will reconnect this, and I'll run this query. One second. Yeah. Okay, you see, I already have this data right here because I have already inserted some kind of dummy data into it. Okay, so now what I'll do is, as part of this exercise, part of our code, we will try to connect with the RDS, and using RDS, we will try to get some data as part of our API operation. Okay, it will be a get API. Now, one important thing, you might have a question, okay, this application that we will be discussing, right? All right, so you might have a question that this application that we will be using as part of this exercise, what is the code base, where is the code base, right? How can I access that code base? How can I have a look at that code base? I will go over it, but I will not deep dive into it because I have already created one video of setting up the Spring Boot application with the local Kubernetes cluster using Helm and etc, all those things. You can check out that video. It's 1.5 hour video. I have already gone into very depth, right? So just check out that video. Now, and also understand the agenda of these videos that I'm creating is to understand the components involved in the function system, also the role and responsibility of those functions, and what are important fundamentals and key parts of it, and only the integration part we will be talking. Now the question is, okay, somebody can question, okay, why are you not provisioning a Kubernetes cluster here? If I do so, it will take a lot of time to create this video. So I have already done it, and that's not a critical part, right? You will find a lot of documentations online to create those Kubernetes cluster, right? And I will not be the correct person to writing that documentation. AWS already, the team of AWS, they have already created very beautiful documents. Go and check it out. All right. So we will be talking about integration, how these things are working, that we already talked as part of the architecture overview, and now we will be having a look when we will doing things in demo. Okay, so I already have this database. You see, I already have these things, right? I have this invoice table and I have this user record table. Now how these table got created? So I was using database migration in my application as Flyway. So that application I will be showing you. Okay. So we discussed this RDS part as well. So we will be talking about this part now. Okay. So you see, this is my application, right? In this application, I have this very basic code. I have a controller. That controller has starts with v1, right, and then slash users. It's a get endpoint. It simply calls to a user service. That user service simply calls to user repository. So I already have defined some entities here, invoice and user, and then these entities basically indicates your table, right? User DB invoice table. So I have one invoice table and I have one user table. Check it out my another video if you want to understand it into depth. And then I have my repositories in order to access all the tables from a cluster. So it's a part of JPA or basic ORM things, right? So now we have this service. Service is simply calling all the repositories and trying to get it all the data. It take out all the data in form of entities, and then we are converting entities to DTOs, which is a very basic routine process as part of any application development. All right. So I'll give the link of GitHub repository of this repository. You can clone it and do the operations over it. Okay. Now this is the basic code base we have. Now if you go back to my diagram, you will see I have written Helm as well, I have written Dockerfile as well, and I have written appsec.yml as well. So these are important things we will have to understand into very depth. All right. So before that, let me also create one thing, secrets. Okay. So I'll say secret. Okay. So I'll say this secret. So this secret is being used by this part. Okay. Okay. Now I'll tell you. Let's go back and understand the Dockerfile first. Dockerfile is very basic version. It's very basic. It's downloading the GDK and whatever the output of Gradle clean build, because the output of Gradle clean build inside build libs, it simply has the jar files. You copy the jar file to your Docker image, and then the moment somebody runs the Docker image, it will automatically call this command java-jar app.jar. That's what it is doing. Now we have already discussed the Docker file. We have discussed the basic code. We discuss about the Helm then. Now Helm charts is used to deploy applications to your Kubernetes cluster. All right. So it's your packaging framework. So you go to Helm charts. Within the application itself, I have the Helm charts inside Helm directory. You can create Helm charts using Helm create chart command, Helm create command. I have already used that. Check out my another video. All right. So we have templates as part of Helm. If you are aware of Helm, and if you are searching this video to understand Helm or to look around the solution around Helm to deploy your video, you might have already aware of the deployment file, HPA file, ingress file. I'll give you a brief. So these templates, this create nothing but the manifest file. So deployment file is the actual deployment, which defines the deployment, your service which exposes the deployment, your port number, etc., etc. HPA is your horizontal pod autoscaler. So let's say it says after X limit of CPU utilization, after X limit of your main memory utilization, I will automatically scale up the number of pods in my Kubernetes cluster and scale down it as per the utilization. So that's the HPA. Okay. And then you have ingress.yml, which is used to, if you are using any ingress load balancer, which is first entry point, right? So this ingress file will basically register your application, create an ingress into it, so that one entry will get created, so automatically your API rewriting will start happening. Okay. Then we have secret.yml. I have intentionally created it. I'll tell you why. I'll come to that point. Service.yml, service account, all those normal files. Values.yml, you already know, right? It's for keeping your all the property values in the values.yml, and you could have multiple values.yml based upon your environment. You might have values-prod.yml for production. You might have values-uat.yml, values-sit.yml, values-dev.yml. That varies from environment to environment, because there might be some property you want in dev but not in SIT, or the value will differ, right? Now secret.yml, you see in the architectural diagram as well, I have created this user service. So this is my user service. Now I have my RDS Postgres server. in order to access this RDS, I need to use username and password. So where I'm keeping the username and password for RDS, I'm using my secret. I have created a Kubernetes secret and kept my username and password into it. My user service is referring to this secret in order to get these values. All right, so how are we getting this value? Using Helm. We have made that configuration. We will have a look on it. Okay, so now I'll go back to my application. So you see, I have a database secret. This is my database URL and this is my database username and password. Okay, now if you see this deployment.yml, it is simple file. I have the liveliness and readiness probe to actuator URL, which is exposed by Spring Boot. So every time your cluster will get up, your workload, your pod will get up, your Kubernetes cluster will keep on checking, right, for readiness. Okay, after some time, this URL, it will check, it'll say, okay, is it up or not? It says 200, then up, and then it will keep on checking for readiness to understand if your workload is up and running or not. Okay, so all those values that we are using here coming from values.yml. Okay, so we will go values.yml, and then another thing, we have this helpers.tpl. so it's the helper template. Now let's suppose I want to create multiple environment variable, but I don't want to keep it in my deployment.yml. So it's a generic file, right? So I want to use this file. So how can I? So one way is you use environment variable in the manifest file deployment.yml and write all the environment variables right here. But since this file is a generic file, it's not correct. It doesn't look good to keep those values inside the generic file. So better way of doing it, you create those value and keep it into helpers.tpl and call it to your deployment.yml. All right. So you see, now if you are aware of Spring Boot, you already know, right, there are properties Spring Boot, Spring data source URL, Spring data source username, Spring data source password, right? So if you go here to my source code, application.yml, you see you have Spring data source URL, username, password, all those things, right? So I want to override these values because these values will differ from environment to environment. If I'm working on locally, I would use my local Postgres. If I'm working dev and QA environment, I might use different RDS. If I'm working on production, I might use a different RDS. So the point is to override it. The best way to override is using Helm. That's what the Helm is for. So I'm overriding environment variable because this is my environment variable, because every time you create a workload in Kubernetes, deploy it, Kubernetes will see your properties and inject it into as a environment variable. So you can override those variables from outside. So what I'm mentioning is, and if you want to still go into depth, check out my another video because I have already created one video. I'm summarizing these things quickly. So all these variables I'm referring to this secret. You see, take value from which secret? This secret. Which secret? Database secret. And what is this secret? Where are we creating it from? We're creating it right here. This is the secret name. All right. Go back, and then we are using key, username, and password. And now these are my environment variable, user service env.vars. Now I am inserting these environment variables to my deployment.yml, which is my manifest file. You see, env, inside env, I say include user service.env.variable. So whatever variables are present inside this path, you just insert it as it is into env of my deployment.yml. So that's the basic concept, right? Now let's move on to values.yml. You see, now as part of my pipeline, I will be creating a Docker image and pushing it to the container registry inside my ECR. Now when I will be doing a Helm deployment, I have to pull that Docker image from the ECR, which is my container registry. So I'll have to pass that URL to my help chart. So this is where I'll pass my URL to my image repository. This is my URL of ECS. If you go here, and then if you go here and then search for ECR, you will see one second. You see, this is my URI, right? Retail solution, this 477 retail solution 1, and same thing is here. Okay, and the tag is by default value 1.0, so you will be overriding this value while deploying it. So this is the basic Helm overview. Let's quickly talk about your appsec.yml. So this is the definition of whole code pipeline, right? As part of inside code pipeline, when the code build will run, all those things, what all things it will do all those things governed by these steps. So these are the things. All right. So let's go over it. Before that, let's jump to your cluster, jump to your code pipeline. And then, so this is the pipeline I have created, right? User service. And this is same pipeline, this pipeline. I'll go to here. This pipeline, right? This green box, this is the pipeline. Inside this code pipeline, I'm only using code build. So if you go here, you see, I'm not using code deploy because code deploy doesn't support deployment to EKS now. So, however, code deploy is same as release pipeline you have in Azure DevOps, right? Where you can separate out your build pipeline and the release pipeline. So you see, we are doing as first part, as part of this code build, what we are doing is, as part of this pipeline, code pipeline, what we're doing is, we are cloning the code from GitHub, okay? So if you go and then you click on settings, general artifact store, this is my artifact store. 1 second, pipelines, view details. Yeah, so I have already created one GitHub connection. The same way you have service connections in Azure, you can create one code star source code connection. So if you see, go here, you see this connection has been already created, right? And then input and output, all those things. Now, as part of first step, you are first cloning the code from your GitHub repository. Okay, and then if I go to edit, you can add multiple stages. If you want to add multiple stages, I can say test z1. I can add this stage, and then I can add a action group. So let's say after my code build is over, what I want to do next, right? So I'll say test 01, or let's say if I say deploy, and then what next you want to do. So for example, I want to do a AWS code build, but we can't, right? We don't have to do. I do approval. I want to send this to approval first he will approve, then only I'll move ahead. I'll do a code build we are already using. Code deploy, earlier I said code deploy, we won't be using it. So those are all different actions you could use as part of your stage in the code pipeline. All right, so I'll delete this, I don't need this. And you can create one pipeline, very easy. You can create pipeline here, all those things, right? So it will ask you as part of code pipeline, because AWS code pipeline is made up of multiple things, right? Your code commit, code artifact, code build, code deploy, but we don't have to use all these stages. We only have to use code build as part of this exercise. And mostly because if you compare Azure to AWS, right, you see Azure has Azure DevOps. It has many tasks already created. All those customized tasks you can directly use in your Azure build pipeline. I don't find it here in AWS, so we have to manually write all the commands in order to govern the other guy to do certain things. So this is something that I find easy for a person who is not much into Azure DevOps. But if you are someone who is pretty much familiar with Azure DevOps, you will find Azure DevOps much easy and rich features compared to AWS code pipeline. This is my personal opinion. So that's how you will create one pipeline. All right, and then as part of second stage, if you go here, as part of my second stage, it's doing a code build, right? And using code build, it is, when it comes to this stage, it have a look over your appsec.yml, and whatever you have written in appsec.yml, it will start executing those from top to bottom. That's why it does as part of your code build. All right. So your definition of code build is being written into appsec.yml. So let's move over quickly to appsec.yml to understand what all things we will have to do in order to deploy our application to the Kubernetes cluster. All right. So you see, there are certain phases, install phases. So first it will execute the install phase, then it will execute the pre-build phase, and then it will execute the build phase. During build, what all commands it has to execute, and after build, what all commands it needs to perform, right, once the build is successfully over. So here you see, first of all, I'm using these commands. So these are AWS CLI specific command. So if you are aware, initially in the starting of this video, I explained IAM. I told you that I have created one user role in order to access this Kubernetes cluster into my local computer, right? If you, I don't know if you are aware, if you open, so yeah, this is my local computer. The way I'm accessing is I already have AWS command installed. You have to, based upon your computer type, you will have to go and install your AWS CLI into your local. Once you do that, you will have to use AWS configure command to connect with your AWS from your local computer. That's how you will be able to access the Kubernetes cluster and do all those things from your local computer to your AWS cloud. Now you will have to log in. How can you log in? You can log in using that particular user that you have to create inside IAM and provide the certain access for Kubernetes service. So it will need some API access key, API access ID, and your region. Okay. So now the same thing I'm doing here. If you see, I'm passing AWS access key. I'm not passing, creating a variable, and then these are nothing but Linux commands. And you see this, I'm passing access key. I'm passing region, and then I am calling this AWS configure command by passing these variables into it, right? Set AWS key, secret key, region, and then I'm running just for testing if my system is connected. So if you run, even in here, if you run, right, you see I'm connected to my Kubernetes cluster in AWS. So you see, even if you go here, see this, I'm connected to my cluster. Okay. And after that, so you see, code build is managed service by AWS. In Azure, you have agents, the concept of agents. You have Microsoft hosted agent, and then you have self-hosted agent. In self-hosted agent, you use your own machines to host your agents, right? But here, code build and code pipeline, this is kind of a managed service in AWS. So AWS automatically takes care of all the infrastructure used as part of your pipeline, right? So, but eventually that will also be a machine, right? AWS will also be using machine, some sort of infrastructure. Now, in order to use Helm to your machine, you need to first install it, right? Because your machine maybe doesn't know about Helm. So what I'm doing, once I am set up, once I'm done in that particular code build machine, whatever the managed service is using, configuring my Kubernetes cluster into that local machine, I am now downloading the Helm, and then I am updating the Helm repository. Okay. So from till this part, I'm done with getting connection with my AWS command, AWS cloud, and then preparing the Helm command and all those tools in my machine. Now then, I'm printing all those things. I'm printing just for my testing purpose. Now I'm making a connection with my ECR repository. So if you go here, if you go here and then if you go to ECR, when I was talking about ECR, I showed you how you can quickly connect with your ECR. There are certain commands, these commands. I have just copied this command and using it my appsec.yml. So you see, I am logging into my ECR container registry. This is the, I'm setting up for certain repository URLs. As the image tag, the Docker image, because I have to create an image tag, right? So using how I'm creating a Docker image tag, because in the professional organization you don't use 1, 2, 3 all things like that for your image tags. Typically you use commit hash IDs, right, to indicate your image tags. That's what I'm using. So I'm using my commit hash ID as my image tag, and then I don't think I'm using this ARN. You can remove this ARN. I don't think we are using it anywhere. You can remove this. Okay, and then I am building it. So as part of my build, what I'm doing, I'm asking this guy to run Gradle clean build. So it will do a clean build and create a jar into my build lib folder. Okay, and then I'm asking this guy to create a Docker image. So I'm using docker build -t, this command. Okay, these are very basic command. I have manually tried all these commands into my another video. You can check out that video of creating using all Docker, Helm, and Spring Boot, etc. in depth. And then I'm tagging this image as the repository URL to my image tag, whatever my image tag is. Okay, and then once my build is over, I'm asking my code build to push that image into my repository. Now what is my repository? My repository is my ECR repository with the image tag. What is my image tag? It is my commit hash, right? And then once you successfully push my Docker image to my container registry, I am running a command. I'm updating the kube config in order for my Kubernetes cluster in my region, and then after that I am running a command helm upgrade install user service helm user service image tag this. So you see, I am using helm upgrade -- install. So helm will check if user service deployment exists. It will upgrade it. If doesn't exist, it will install it. That's what it would do. The installation name of my deployment is user -service. How can I get the Helm chart? I can get the Helm chart help_user service, because you see, code build will clone your code into a machine. When it will clone a code, it will put it somewhere. Let's say it put it inside X directory. So X directory is the root directory from where this abstract.yml is being run. Now from the root directory, it will look for the folder Helm. So where is the folder? This is the folder. Inside Helm, it will look for user-service. So inside this user-service, it will find the all Helm charts. And then I'm using --image.tag is equal to override with this image tag. So now this image tag will get override with this image.tag, this value, because by default I have kept it 1. Okay, so now I've already committed it. I made a change, so I'll commit it. So once I commit it, what will happen is my code pipeline will get triggered, and as of now I don't have any I don't have any deployment currently in my Kubernetes cluster. Once we do that, your code pipeline will get triggered and it will deploy your user service into your Kubernetes server. Also, it will make a connection with the RDS server. We will be able to make a hit from my local computer. Alright, so I'll go here and then I'll say, and what is this change? Okay, ignore this change. Okay, I have removed this. I'll say updating appsec yml file. Okay, I'll do a commit. I'll commit and I'll push it. So if I go here and updating appsec.yml. Okay, so I've deleted this file. It's here. I'll go to my pipeline. It must have been triggered. Code pipeline. Okay, so build has been triggered. So it's in progress. I'll click on view details. Wait for some time. Okay, so it's running all the commands. See, running this command, running this command. So these are the same commands that I have explained here. You see, these are same commands that I have explained here. EKS cluster name, etc., all these things right here. So now running this command, AWS configure. So now it's doing Gradle build. So install phase, it was successful. Now wait for Gradle clean build to over, and this is the repository URI, right? So I'm doing echoes just for testing purpose, because when I was creating this, there were certain issues that I was facing. In order to, for test purpose, I created echo. So I'll see, okay, what is the value you are passing, exact values you are passing. It's currently doing Gradle build. Okay, so it's currently in the pre-build phase. Oh, sorry, build phase. Because say entering phase build, right? And then wait for some time. And meanwhile it gets completed. I will everything I have in my repository here, right? Currently it's a private repository. After uploading this video, I'll make this repository as the public repository, so you'll be able to access this source code and play around in your local computer after cloning to it. Okay, go down. Okay, so now the Docker build is the Gradle build is completed. Now it's moving into the Docker image creation phase, right? So it's creating. You see, it's copying app.jar, and then it has created all the image. Now, yeah. So yeah, Docker push. So it has already pushed to this here, right? So if I go to here and then search for, I'll go, where is my, yeah. If I go to ECR, I go to ECR, Elastic Container Repository, yeah, go to here. You see this image tag. So this is today's time, right? This image tag, this is the commit 73C73. You see C73, this is the commit, right? This commit ID. Okay, now go down. You see it is using, the Helm is saying user service does not exist, I will deploy it. So it started deploying it. So it says succeed. So my pipeline got completed and everything is successful. So now if I say done, see my pipeline is green. I'll go and check for my Helm list. I have user service into default namespace. You should not be using namespace by default, because it is just for demo purpose. I'm using my default namespace, and then this is deployed. If I say kubectl get pods, you see user service is running. All right. So if I say you see, so my service is up and running at 8080, and also you see it has made a connection with my RDS database, right? Which is running into AWS cloud. Now let's port forward it and try accessing one API. Okay, I will port forward this. So this is service. Which service? User hyphen service 80808080. Okay. Okay. Now the service is now in my local. I'll go here. I'll try to access my API. Okay. I'll say HTTP v1. I already have it here, one ID. So this is the ID. I already have this ID. Right. So if I run this command, this is the ID. It will go and check and see I'm getting data from my 8080. So this is, now if you go here and then check, see it's looking for into database for ID. So if I do this and keep running my send button, so it will keep on running. See, all these calls are going to my Kubernetes cluster workload pod. All right, so that's how you finished this architecture, right? And we used code build in order to do your pipeline things, do your deployment. So I'll quickly summarize. This is the subsystem. We are using RDS Postgres and ECR for container registry. Then we have ECR for our Kubernetes cluster. And everything is inside same VPC. We have our roles into IAM. And then this developer, which is as for me in this video, I'm the one who is hosting its source code into GitHub repository. Repository has a Spring Boot code for acting this particular pod as a microservice, and then it's being developed in Java language. It has Helm charts in it. It also has Docker file, and it also has appsec.yml. Now this as part of this appsec.yml, whatever you are using code pipeline for your DevOps pipeline, inside the code pipeline you are using code build. Whenever your code build gets triggered, it automatically start all the instructions which is written into appsec.yml. As part of your appsec.yml, you are first connecting from your machine, which is being used by your managed code build internally to your AWS cloud. Then you are connecting with the cluster. From that cluster, you are then doing a Gradle build. Whatever comes out of your jar, you put it into Docker image. You prepare a Docker image, push it to ECR repository. Once you push it, then you run your Helm upgrade command, and then you have your workload right here. And your username and password, all these credential details are being accessed via database secret. All right, guys. So this was everything. Now let me please know, in case you have any questions, you can comment it down. I will be able to answer. And I'm also present in LinkedIn. You can connect me and you send out your questions, queries there. And if you think there is something else that you want to understand in depth, just comment it out. I'll create one video for that. All right, guys. Thank you so much.